What's up, Glam Squad? It's Johanna with God is Glamorous, where we learn how to live our best lives through Jesus Christ. And today, we are talking all about how to eat healthier, how to have self-discipline when it comes to eating unhealthy foods, and more importantly, how to avoid food temptation altogether. So this is especially important because as entrepreneurs and business owners, we have to understand that health is wealth. So no matter how great we're doing, no matter how well we're doing, no matter how much money we're making, if we're constantly spending all of our time in the hospital or spending all of our money on hospital bills, then that means nothing. So we have to make sure that we treat our body like a well-oiled machine. We know that our body is our temple, and we're only putting great things in our body that will fuel our bodies and help us recharge and give us that energy that we need in order to keep doing great things. The reason why I chose this topic was because I found it interesting that throughout the Bible, when the enemy tries to tempt people, he does it through food. And it blew my mind because when we look at Adam and Eve and the humans that God created first, the enemy could have tempted them in so many other ways. But he chose food. He chose a simple fruit to completely alter God's plan. And he also did it with Jesus. He tried to tempt Jesus into turning stone into bread. And it makes me wonder, could there be a chance that the enemy tries to tempt us through food, but we don't realize it? And one of the ways in which we are able to avoid temptation and to just really stand firm against any schemes of the enemy is to be disciplined when it comes to what we eat. So, without further ado, let's get into how we're able to eat healthy, avoid food temptation, and to stay disciplined when it comes to what we eat. All right, so before we get into the specific topics, I want us to examine the diet that God originally planned for us to eat. So when you take a look at Genesis, a lot of people may not like to hear this, but God originally intended for us to be vegans. I'm going to say it again for the people in the back. God originally intended for us to be vegans. So by his design, we were supposed to be eating fruits, seed-bearing fruits, and herbs of the field. So in Genesis chapter 1, verse 30, it says, "Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and I have given every green plant as food for all the wild animals, the birds in the sky, and the small animals that scurry along the ground, everything that has life," and that is what happened. So not only did God originally plan for us to eat fruits and veggies, he also commanded the wild animals to eat plants as well. We're talking bears, tigers, lions. They also ate green plants because the Garden of Eden was perfect. There was no sin, and because there was no sin, there was no death. No one had to die. There were no sacrifices. So as a result, everyone just ate plants. So we have to ask ourselves, if God originally designed us to eat plants, what does he think of what we eat today? Even though God allowed us to eat meat, does that mean that we should eat more meat than plants? It's a question worth asking. So it wasn't until originally before Adam and Eve sinned, as you can see, God gave us fruit to eat. So every seed-bearing plant and every fruit of the tree. But after Adam and Eve sinned, that's when he allowed us to eat the herb of the field. So it says in Genesis chapter 17, verse 18, "To Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field." So, before Adam and Eve sinned, God gave us fruit, every fruit of the tree to eat. Then, after Adam and Eve sinned, that's when he said, "You will eat plants of the field." So that's when the vegetables came about. And it wasn't until the great flood, with Noah in the ark, is when God allowed us to eat meat. So in Genesis chapter 9, verse 3, it says, everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. So again, just proving my point before, God originally gave us green plants to eat. We were on a plant-based vegan diet, and then after the green flood, that's when God allowed us to have meat. But it's really interesting to think that just because God gave us meat to eat doesn't mean that we should always be eating it. God is a God who is an absolute genius, and one of the reasons why God commanded us to be plant-based eaters is because God knows of the amazing benefits that come along with eating plants. So there's a thing called acidic versus alkaline, and there's a pH scale from 0 to 14. So foods that are from 7 to 14 are alkaline, and foods below 7, foods from 0 to 7 are acidic. So some of the foods that are alkaline are, of course, your fruits, your veggies, your herbs, your nuts, your seeds, your berries, all of that. Those are going to be on the alkaline scale. And the foods that are acidic are going to be your meat, your cheese, your dairy, your processed foods, your candy, your cakes. Those are going to be on the acidic scale. So what's really important is the fact that your body pH level is determined based on the food that you eat. So when you eat more alkaline foods, your body becomes more alkaline. When you eat more acidic foods, your body, of course, becomes more acidic. So being the fact that plants are more alkaline and the fact that God allows us and encourages us to eat plant-based foods, that is what turn allows us to have our alkaline body. And it gets a little bit further because in an alkaline state, that's when disease cannot survive. Disease and sickness cannot survive in an alkaline environment. Look it up, it is science. So that's why when you're sick, it's really important to get your veggies, get your vitamin C, all of that, and all of that comes from the fruits that we eat. So it's important to remember, just like Hippocrates says, I try not to quote men in the God is glamorous theme, but Hippocrates, who is actually considered the godfather of medicine, he said, let thy food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food. So consequently, we can get the nutrients that we need from food so long as we eat the right foods. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about how we're able to eat healthy, how we're able to get more of our energy from plants and plant-based foods, and more importantly, how we can learn how to lead a more healthy and vibrant life. All right, so the first way in which you can learn how to eat healthier and how to avoid that food temptation is to know why you started. So I work in an office, and whenever I go in, when someone's celebrating a birthday or just because it's Friday or something, people are always bringing in cake, cookies, donuts, all kinds of junk food. And it is so rare to hear someone saying, oh, I'm not going to eat that. Nope, I'm good. I rarely ever hear it. When someone brings in some unhealthy food like a donut or a cake, people, it's a wrap. It's amazing to see how people will jump at food just because it's there. And it's so funny because when people are eating these foods, they're like, oh man, I really shouldn't eat it, but you know what, it's Friday. Or you know what, I started my diet today, but it's okay, I'll start it at 5. And they just make up all these crazy excuses on why they can just go ahead and eat it. But it makes me wonder, how far off would you be able to be, or what incredible things could you achieve if you simply said no to the foods that you should not be able to eat, that you shouldn't be eating? So taking a look at Adam and Eve, one of the reasons why they ate that forbidden fruit is because they forgot why they started. So if you are on a healthy eating plan or a healthy eating regimen, and you are doing really well, but then someone brings free lunch or someone brings a cupcake, it's important for you to remember why you started, remember those goals. And one of the reasons why Adam and Eve failed is because they forgot why they started. In Genesis, we see the enemy trying to tempt Eve, and he tries to twist her words. And she remembers why she starts first. She says, no, I can't, because God said we'll die. But the enemy's like, did God really say that? And check this out. So in Genesis chapter 3, verses 4 through 6, it says, you will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some of it and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. So this is what happens. Immediately, they forgot why they started, and they fell into the trap of temptation. So whenever you are going to pursue a new diet or try to eat healthier, understand that there are going to be temptations that come your way, but it's so important for you to remember why you started. All right, so the second way in which you are able to avoid temptation and learn how to eat healthier is to understand the effects of what you eat. So we all know that there are consequences that come along with our actions. If we eat unhealthy foods, we're most likely to feel lazy, get less energy, feel guilty, sometimes even gain weight. But if we eat healthy, we're going to have all that energy. We're going to feel refreshed. We're going to feel vibrant. We're going to feel renewed. We're going to feel accomplished. So understand that with whatever food that you eat, there's going to be consequences, whether they're positive or negative. And it's important to realize that. So taking a look at Adam and Eve, it's important for them, or it was important for them to realize the consequences of what comes about when they eat certain foods. So God told Adam, who in turn told Eve, that they should not eat that forbidden fruit because they would surely die. So we have to ask ourselves, what foods should we not be eating? Because it will cause us to get sick. It will cause us to feel lazy. Understanding the effects of those foods is going to be really, really important. So it says in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 through 17, "But the Lord God warned him, 'You may freely eat the fruit of every tree in the garden except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. If you eat its fruit, you are sure to die.'" So we have to understand that when we eat certain foods, it's going to have consequences. Some of the foods that we eat can contribute to the sickness that we have. If we eat a lot of sugar and a lot of cake and a lot of candy, that can lead to diabetes. If we eat a lot of fried food like pork rinds, that can lead to weight gain and clogged arteries. So it's important to understand that with everything that you put in your mouth, it's contributing to your biological structure. It's either making you sick or making you healthier, and it's up to you to decide. All right, so the third way in which you are able to avoid temptation and to eat healthier is to not act on impulse. So we've all been there. We're doing really well on our diet. We're juicing our celery and we're eating our salad. And then, boom, a brownie pops up out of nowhere, or a Snickers bar is like, it's so funny. I kid you not. One day, a little bit off topic, one day I was fasting, and then just a bunch of random Snickers bars just appears on, like, in the hallway, just for no reason. And you have to understand that, like, when you are doing something good, when it comes to your diet, temptation is going to pop up. So you have to be able to learn not to act on impulse, and this is what we can learn from Jacob and Esau. So Jacob and Esau were fraternal twins within the Bible. Esau was the oldest, Jacob was the youngest, and it also says when Jacob and Esau were born, Jacob actually was holding on to Esau's heel because it seems as though they were constantly fighting for their firstborn right. So in biblical days, the firstborn received all kinds of benefits just for being that firstborn. So he received a lot of status. He received inheritance. He received all kinds of leadership abilities that the secondborn wouldn't necessarily be granted. So they were constantly fighting for this firstborn right. So there was one day when Esau visited Jacob, and Jacob was making some red stew. And Esau was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so hungry, give me some soup." And Esau was like, "Sell me your birthright." And Esau was like, "Done, I'm so hungry, my birthright doesn't even matter, I'm about to die right now." And Esau ended up selling his birthright to Jacob simply because of his appetite, and he acted on impulse. So we have to ask ourselves, what bad decisions are we making simply because we're acting on impulse? So check this verse out. So in Genesis chapter 5, verses 29 through 33, it says, "Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, 'Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished.' This is why he was also called Edom. Jacob replied, 'First, sell me your birthright.' 'Look, I'm about to die,' Esau said. 'What good is that birthright to me?' But Jacob said, 'Swear to me first.' So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. So as you can see, Esau made a really, really stupid decision, and he sold his birthright to his brother simply because he was hungry. So we have to ask ourselves, what bad decisions are we making simply because we're thinking on impulse? Is our diet controlling our ability to make those really wise decisions? So one of the ways in which you can prevent yourself from acting on impulse and from making those really bad decisions is to control your appetite. All right, my favorite point about this video is the fact that one of the ways in which you're able to avoid temptation and to eat healthier is you have to learn how to say no in a group setting. So, have you ever started eating healthy and your friends were like, hey, let's go out to brunch, let's go out to dinner, and when you get there, everybody is just ordering anything that they want: steak, lobster, crab, spinach artichoke, wine. They're just ordering all kinds of food, and you're like, dang, I'm on a diet right now, or, oh, I'm really not supposed to be eating that, and it's really hard for you to go along with it because everyone else is doing it. But this is exactly what Daniel does. So they were held captive by King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, and the king was grooming them to become part of his tribe of some sort. And he invited all the boys, all the men, to sit at his table and to eat all the king's delicacies. And Daniel actually rejected it. So the king's delicacies, this was really good food. This was meat, this was cheese, this was wine. It was the best of the best food. And he rejected this because some of the food did not go along with his Jewish tradition. So some of the food maybe had been required to be prepped a certain way, and he didn't want to dishonor his body and his God based on the food that was not prepared in the correct way. So Daniel said, hey, I can't eat this. I can't eat this food. I'll tell you what, just give me vegetables and water. And they were like, what? Vegetables and water? So this is how the Daniel fast came about, and this is exactly what happens. So in Daniel chapter 1, verses 12 through 16, it says, please test your servants for 10 days and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies, and as you see fit, so deal with your servants. So he consented with them in this matter and tested them 10 days. So as you can see, Daniel is putting them to the test. He says, hey, I don't want to eat this food, but this is what I want to do. Give us only vegetables and water for 10 days, and after those 10 days, compare and see who looks better. So they're like, all right, we'll give you vegetables, but after 10 days, if this isn't working, you're going to have to eat our food. So this is what happens. So in verse 15, it says, and at the end of 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away their portion of delicacies and the wine that they were to drink and gave them vegetables. So after the end of those 10 days, Daniel and his friends looked so much better than the men who were eating the king's delicacies. So we have to ask ourselves, are the fruits and the veggies that we're eating, are they going to be more beneficial than the meat and the processed food and the cheese and the dairy that we're so used to eating? And the answer may surprise you. So when you eat more plant-based foods, it is scientifically proven that it does wonders for your body. Your hair is longer, it's shinier, your nails are a lot less brittle, your skin is clearer, you have more energy. And this is exactly what Daniel experienced, and how now we're able to observe the Daniel fast, because this is exactly where it came from. So when we begin to eat more fruits and more veggies and less animal products, less meat, less cheese, less dairy, that's when we'll be able to look better, feel better, and ultimately be a lot more better off. And the last way in which you are able to avoid temptation and to eat a lot healthier is you need to have the ability to say no. Just say no. So now we're going to be looking at Jesus and how Jesus was tempted in the wilderness for 40 days. And after those 40 days were up, that's when the enemy comes along and tries to tempt Jesus. And he tempts Jesus in a lot of different ways. But the first way in which the enemy tries to tempt Jesus is through his stomach. So the first thing that he tries to get Jesus to do is to turn stone into bread. So it says in Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, 'If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread.'" So as we see here, the enemy or the devil is tempting Jesus to turn the stone into bread, but Jesus says no. And he also turns to Scripture and he turns to God in order to beat that temptation. So it says in Matthew chapter 4, verse 4, Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." So sometimes we have to realize that it is going to be hard. We are going to be tempted, and sometimes we're just going to have to call on God and pray and to call on the strength of the Holy Spirit to help us to defeat any kind of temptation that we are facing when it comes to food. So it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, "The temptations in your life are no different from what others experience, and God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure." So as you can see, as mentioned before, God is never going to tempt you beyond what you can actually stand. So if you are having any trouble, just remember that God is your ultimate strength, and you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. All right, so those are my top 5 ways in which you are able to avoid food temptation, but I also want to remind you that at the end of the day, your body is your temple, and your body is something that should be honored and respected. So in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 19, it says, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own." So ultimately, I'm not telling you that you should just eat a plant-based diet for the rest of your life and never enjoy food again. I'm not saying that because, number one, eating plant-based food is actually really good if you do it right. But I'm also just trying to say that you should have the ability to discern between what you should eat and what you should not eat. Just because it's there doesn't necessarily mean that you should have it. So ultimately, have fun, enjoy yourself, live life, and enjoy the food that God has given you, because food is truly a gift from God, but have the ability to discern it. I'm going to leave you with this final verse that's going to help you learn how to make those healthy decisions. So in Romans chapter 14, verses 24, it says, "But if you have doubts about whether or not you should eat something, you are sinning if you go ahead and do it, for you are not following your convictions. If you do anything you believe is not right, you are sinning." Don't want to leave you kind of on a Debbie Downer note, but this verse snatched my edges because I had no idea that this verse even existed. But it says, if you are eating something and you feel convicted that you shouldn't eat it, then you just probably shouldn't eat it. One of the gifts that God gives us is the ability to discern, and it's our 6th sense. So when we have this feeling that we shouldn't be eating something, chances are just don't eat it. So there are times where I may have a whole slice of cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory, red velvet, my absolute favorite, so good. But there are also times when I have to say, "Hey, babe, you can't have this because it's a lot of sugar. It can raise your blood sugar. You don't want that." So sometimes it's okay to treat yourself, but you also have to have the ability to discern between whether or not you should eat those kinds of foods or not. So ultimately, all I'm saying is to be smart, don't act on impulse, stay prepared, stay disciplined, and once you're able to master that, I truly believe you're able to master anything. All right? So I love you guys so much. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next video. Stay glamorous.